Hi, everybody. Whoa, that's loud. Sorry about that early in the morning. I'm loud on my own, but the mic is woo. These lights are intense too. Sorry, this is my first time up on the stage. Welcome back. I'm so excited to see a full room on the last day of the conference this early in the morning. So I think you all deserve to give yourselves a hand for getting up. So I'm Eileen Neely. I'm HAC's Director of Lending. I've been with HAC for 4.5 years. And so for those of you who can do HAC conference math, this is my first HAC conference. And it has been amazing. And I can't take any credit because I was on vacation for the last 2 weeks. So I left everything up to Shontario Charleston, who's sitting here in the front. The conference has been fun. Who's had some fun? Just a little? It's been inspiring, and it's been humbling to know how much I don't know, how much else there is to learn, and you guys are who I'm learning it from. So I think the peer-to-peer exchanges that are going on in the hallways have been phenomenal. So I have loved meeting all of you. I've loved hearing what's happening in rural communities across the country. And what's really inspiring is we're not just hearing problems, we're hearing about hope. We're hearing about what's working. I have learned so much from these sessions and in the hallways. Every day has been packed. Like just yesterday, and when I talk about like yesterday, it was so much in yesterday, it felt like a whole week. I don't know if it felt like that for you. So welcome to the third week of the HAC conference. So it started off with Adrienne Todman from HUD. She's HUD Deputy Secretary. For all those who don't know, like HUD's, or like Washington, D.C. speak, it took me a while, like, what do all these names mean? You know, oh, well, she's a secretary, right? Like, no. She's the number 2 person in HUD, and she said that when things don't work in your communities and you have ideas of how the HUD programs can work better in your community, to call her, to email her, to contact her, because if she doesn't know, she can't fix. And it ended last night with our award ceremony. Congratulations again to all the award winners. And Rutha Mae Harris. I still have chills. And it's not because this hotel has been super cold. Like her songs of freedom and hope, wow, wow, wow. So I am still on a high. What a day, what a week. And we're here on Friday with still more really deep content for y'all. Over the past few days, one of the things that struck me about this conference, and I've been around the world a lot, around this industry a lot, never in one place have I seen so many dedicated federal workers from so many different agencies who are equally committed to rural communities as we are. And what they do and how they do it is hard, and they are our amazing partners. And not just from like our stalwart partners like USDA and HUD who are up here, but also from NEA, from the ICH, the Interagency Council on Homelessness, from EPA, like all over, people recognize rural, and our federal government recognizes rural. So today we get to hear from our most stalwart partners, HUD and USDA. So on the stage we'll hear the big picture from Marion McFadden and Joaquin Alturo, and then we'll split into breakout rooms, one for HUD, one for USDA, where you can really get down into the nitty-gritty and the weeds. So let's start with Marion McFadden and Joaquin Alturo. Marion McFadden runs Community Planning and Development, CPD, What does that mean? Again, HUD speak. So under her purview, she oversees some really important programs like SHOP, super close to my heart, the Section 4 Rural Capacity Building, the Veterans Programs, so it's all under Marion. And then we have Joaquin, who you met earlier this week. I'm not sure he needs any introduction because he was amazing, but he is the administrator over all the rural housing services. So that's, both single family, multifamily, they do it all. So with no further ado, I'm going to hand it over to Marion and let her speak.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. I appreciate the introduction. It is hard to figure out what all the titles mean, but what my title means is I'm the first person Deputy Secretary will forward your email to if it relates to some of our rural programs and really most of the grant programs that you see in your communities. So I am really happy to be here and appreciate the invitation to talk to you about the work that we're doing in rural communities. To HAC, thank you for having me. We love working with you. There is no one quite like you in our field, and really appreciate the partnership. So in the Office of Community Planning and Development, we have about $10 billion in annual grants. So the largest ones go by formula. So the CDBG, or Community Development Block Grant Program, the Home Program, the National Housing Trust Fund, and then we have the competitive homeless programs, and then some of the smaller nonprofit programs. We also have a really growing portfolio of congressionally directed spending, community project funding, you may know them as earmarks, where Congress picks the projects and then we're responsible for working with the recipients. And we see those going all over the country, including rural America. And I would be remiss if I did not mention what has kind of become the tail wagging the dog in our office, which is the tens of billions of dollars for long-term disaster recovery that we receive. If you haven't had a major disaster in your community, smile, because recovery is long and hard, but you might not realize that after FEMA provides emergency assistance, after the biggest disasters, HUD often gets funding from Congress on a one-time basis to provide long-term recovery funds. So that's what the overview of our office is. So I'm going to tell you a few things that you already know better than I do, just to show you that at HUD we're aware of them too. So according to research conducted by USDA in 2018, there were 664 high poverty counties in which an average of 20% or more of the population had lived below the federal poverty level since 2014. The majority of those counties were rural, so 524 of those counties, or 79%. The high poverty counties represented 1 in every 4 rural counties, compared with 1 out of every 10 urban counties. The counties are not evenly distributed. They are geographically concentrated and disproportionately located in regions with above average percentages of people of color. So we are very aware of the intersection of racial equity, poverty, and rural America, and are working to provide support with eyes wide open. Challenges in rural communities, as you well know, often require regional solutions. The lack of capacity to undertake large-scale projects at the local government level increases the importance of the state government and wider regional partnerships. An entire rural region or portion of the state might share in the larger economic development or major infrastructure project that's beyond the scale of any individual local government to implement. We bear that in mind in providing our technical assistance and making our capacity building available because communities need to be supported not just to work directly with HUD, but to work with counties and state governments as funds become available. As you probably heard from Deputy Secretary Todman, but may have forgotten because I heard there was a late night last night with dancing. The president asked us to support rural communities, and we created the Rural Prosperity Coordinating Council in support of the Rural Partners Network. So we want to create a lasting entity within HUD that's committed to strengthening the impact of our programs in rural communities. We are not thinking of this as temporary work. And so it's not something that the Biden-Harris appointees are simply doing and the career folks are tolerating. We actually asked our permanent career teams to lead the work and see that happening across the country. We're active on a number of fronts, including listening sessions, right? So we understand the importance of ensuring that any ideas we have are coming from the ground up and are responsive to the needs that communities have right now, and not 10 years ago or the last time we read something about it. It's important to get out in communities and hear directly. We're working also explicitly with tribal leaders to ensure that Indian country is part of the work that we're doing. One of the issues that's come up is the importance of streamlining the definition of rural wherever possible. We've heard it's a real burden to try to navigate all the different programs and all the different definitions. So we asked our lawyers to roll up their sleeves and take out their pencils and find us as much flexibility as possible. So far, it's not as much flexibility as we would like, but we have found some ability to align. We're working closely with our partners at USDA and across the federal family. We want to support both the Rural Partners Network communities and rural America communities in general. We want to increase the impact of our capacity building programs. As part of our commitment to the Rural Partners Network, we answered the call for resources and pledged $500,000 for rural.gov. If you haven't gone to rural.gov, we really recommend checking it out. We're working in partnership to ensure that we're using plain English, or as close to plain English as a government could possibly get. So it's not a mystery to figure out the resources that we're making available. In the Section 4 NOFO for fiscal year 2022-23, we asked applicants to identify and describe their participation in RPN, in their abstracts, Rural Partners Network. And we committed to supporting 5 of the Rural Partners Network's signature projects. So I could talk about those all day. I will spare you, but let me just highlight some of the work rooted in Kentucky Highlands Community Network. So we're working with 8 Kentucky counties to support recovery of 1,500 homes that were destroyed from flooding in July of 2022. And really humbled to be able to make that funding available and to provide the support to communities in partnership with FEMA, but we know that the money we provide is never enough. So we know we need to support these communities in being creative and leveraging all the resources that they can. I also wanted to mention the work we're doing with Fulton County Community Network in Fulton County, Kentucky, and City of South Fulton, Tennessee. So there's a housing initiative that's going to build housing in an area that hasn't seen a single new home built in more than 18 years, and working with 100 vacant lots that are ready for housing development. So we're working with all 5 of these signature projects, and again, just wanted to say we really want to continue this work in the future and not have it be a one-off political priority. As you know very well, estimates are that there's a shortage of at least 1.5 million units of affordable housing. Some studies say the nationwide shortage surpasses 3 million units. So at HUD, we're focusing on working across the federal government and with the private sector and all the sectors to ensure that there is funding available to support the stock that already exists and to ensure that we are building new affordable housing and trying to keep pace with the needs of the country. The SHOP program is also one of my favorites and heavily used in rural areas. Based on the data we've gotten from our SHOP grantees, half of the homes are constructed in rural communities. SHOP provides funds to nonprofit organizations to purchase the home sites to be used for sweat equity and volunteer-based homeownership programs for low-income people and families. So we are getting that site ready to go for construction. And then home funds also often then contribute or pay the entire cost of the development of the housing, but not necessarily. We do allow funds to be used for planning and administrative costs, but basically those funds are being used for the land acquisition infrastructure improvements. A SHOP grantee can spend up to $25,000 per unit on the combined cost of land acquisition and infrastructure improvements. And we know that in some communities that's more than enough, and some communities that's maybe only half of what's needed. So we're trying to be flexible with your local needs. Through the fiscal year 2022 NOFO, HAC was awarded $4 million. Congratulations again. And we'll be leveraging $618,600. And then local affiliates compete for that funding from HAC. Each affiliate has the flexibility to design a program meeting the needs of the community. So again, one of my favorite programs. It's not one of our biggest, but I have heard in traveling the country how much it means, how much the SHOP funding means, and the other funds that we provide to rural America. And a couple of weeks ago, October 2nd, we announced the availability of $13.5 million through the fiscal year 23 SHOP program, and that's for eligible national and regional nonprofit organizations and consortia who have experience facilitating self-help housing opportunities. Applications are due on December 4th. Good luck. One of our other resources used by rural communities is the Rural Capacity Building Program, which enhances the capacity of local governments, tribes, housing development organizations, rural community development corporations, or CDCs, and rural community housing development organizations, or CHODOs, so that they can carry out community development and affordable housing activities to benefit low and moderate income families and people in rural areas. For the fiscal year 21-22 Rural Capacity Building, or RCB, Notice of Funding Opportunity, HAC was awarded approximately $2.3 million in funds. So again, HAC is just such an important partner to HUD in supporting rural America. Let's talk a little bit about homelessness in rural communities. I know this is front of mind for many of you, and want to assure you that it is for Secretary Fudge and for all of us at HUD. This year has really brought some troubling headlines about increases in point-in-time counts and increases in homelessness as we see communities losing pandemic-era supports. That means more people are sleeping on the streets, in encampments, under bridges and cars, places not fit for human habitation. Back in 2020, we saw that there were 580,466 people experiencing homelessness across the United States who lived in rural, and 18% of them were living in rural communities. Among people who are unsheltered, so really truly living outdoors, 20% lived in rural communities. So we attribute this to a lot of things, primarily the drastic increase in costs for affordable housing, for rental housing, the lack of supply. Ending homelessness is a priority for us. We talk about addressing homelessness with the urgency that it requires, and we need all of your best ideas. So I'm going to re-up what the Deputy Secretary said about send us your ideas, send us your solutions, because we have seen great work going on around the country, and we want to use our platform to share that with other communities so that they can learn from what's working for you. We also put out through this year 70,000 new emergency housing vouchers for public agencies throughout the country for families who were experiencing and at risk of homelessness. In allocating the new vouchers, we work to include PHAs in smaller and rural communities that might have not have had resources, access to these resources in the past. And we launched our first of its kind ever special notice of funding opportunity for continuum of care funds just for rural and for unsheltered homelessness, allocating a total of $486 million across 62 communities of care. Looking ahead, we have 3 new programs that we receive funding for under the Continuum of Care NOFO that I think you might be especially, under the fiscal year 2023 appropriations that I think you might be especially interested in. The first is a NOFO that's out on the street now. It's called Pro Housing, Pathways to Removing Obstacles. And here, states, cities, counties, and metropolitan planning organizations are eligible to come in and say, we've taken some steps to address our barriers to affordable housing, but we need additional funding to either keep building out our plan or move forward with what we already set in motion. So the statute looks at things like zoning changes, really a variety of activities that are possible. That notice is on the street now. and communities were required to do at least 2 weeks of public comment. So you may have seen that in your community. You might take a look and Google it. Everything has to be on their websites. The original deadline was October 30th, but we extended it to November 6th, so we're looking forward to digging into those applications. It's one-time funding from Congress, but we hope to extend it because we think this money is really needed, and we're looking forward to getting that funding out. The second one is a bigger pot. This is $225 million for manufactured housing. This one's called the PRICE program. We've never had anything like this, grant funding explicitly for manufactured housing residents and for communities. It can be used to replace old units. It can be used for repairs. It can be used for infrastructure in communities. It can be used to prevent displacement. Really, there's a wide range of eligible activities there, and the statute explicitly calls out the need to support communities in disaster-prone areas and allows us to do a tribal set-aside. So that NOFO will come out, Notice of Funding Opportunity will come out later this year, and we're really looking forward to spreading the word and ask for your help when that NOFO comes out to make sure that communities everywhere are aware of this special funding. We know that roughly 6% of the nation's stock is manufactured housing, so better late than never to Congress in terms of providing special funding explicitly for grants for these communities. And specifically, as we look at tribal land, about 17% of households are living in manufactured housing. The third program I wanted to mention is for our continuum of care for permanent supportive housing. So there we got a special allocation of $75 million. So that NOFO will come out later this year or potentially early next year. So let's just say this winter. That NOFO will come out this winter. We know that permanent supportive housing is really, really important, and communities have been really asking us for additional funding. So excited to be able to make that funding available. I also want to note that we're updating our CDBG for housing notice. So CDBG funds go to states for use in non-entitlement areas, as well as to the larger counties and cities across the country. Historically, manufactured housing couldn't be purchased with CDBG. I invite you to take a look at the new notice when it comes out, because we found some new flexibility. This is the first really big update to our CDBG guidance on housing in 15 years. So really what I hope you take away is that we're doing everything we can think of to provide additional supports within the authority that we have, and value your partnership. Thank you.
Good morning, all. Buenos dias. I hope all is well. Anybody wake up with a stiff neck? I woke up with one this morning. Maybe for the suggestions box for a Housing Assistance Council is rural-based masseuse Friday morning. For those that kind of, for those that cut up the rug a little too much last night, or maybe just us that didn't sleep that well. And so forgive me if I seem a bit stiff, but it equally as excited with or without the rural-based masseuse this morning. So again, good morning to everyone. And thank you to Eileen and the Housing Assistance Council and all of you here today to be a part of this very important conversation this morning. But before I begin, I want to take a brief moment to acknowledge our amazing rural development state directors. We have a significant amount of them here today. I'm hoping that you had an opportunity to speak with them, bump into them over the last few days. Really appreciate them traveling in and being part of this conference here. And also, we just have a great representation of many of our RD and RHS staff that are here with us today. And you had mentioned just the hard and tireless work that they do. And so for us to get them a chance to get out here and us just be collectively to network and get to know each other has been an absolute privilege. So if I'm one more time, if we just might give an applause. You know, I want to start with a message that I've been consistent in as I travel. I want to say that the headwinds are changing. And what I mean by that is that when we have spoken about housing in the last 20 years, in most cases, we're speaking about our large cities, right? Affordability, supply, it's been LA, New York, Austin, Chicago. But because the headwinds are changing, this conversation about the critical need for affordability and supply in rural communities, it's coming forward, and it's because of you all. What I've realized is in the last 20 years is that a majority of our elected officials on their platform, housing was never one or two in those conversations. But because of you all in being very vocal, in making sure that they understand our need, the change is coming. How do I know that? Many ways. We're seeing record amount of requests for technical assistance from the Hill. We have you speaking at Senate testimonies. I think this past year we had 2 or 3 Senate testimonies that were specific to rural housing service. And in those testimonies, you had mentioned not only do we need resources for those that we serve, but we need for you to make an investment in rural housing service, in the modernization of the rural housing service, in their IT, in their workforce. And I don't think I can thank you enough for your advocacy and your continued advocacy around that. That is something that is just, I can't explain how important that is, because of the fact that as we move forward and you continue to push, and please continue to push as you have, is that hopefully we will continue to see the resources that we need for the work that we do on a daily basis. When President Biden and Vice President Harris took office, our country faced an unprecedented crisis, a raging pandemic, an economic crisis, a climate crisis, and racial injustice. The administration moved quickly to tackle these crises head on and deliver results for working families through resources made available by the American Rescue Plan, the Inflation Reduction Act, and the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law, CHIPS, and the Science Act. I'm proud of all that we have accomplished, but I think we can all agree that there's much more to do, and that's why we're here. We can't do this alone. We need our partners to work alongside the federal government, and we especially need all of you to help us serve communities in rural America more effectively. So today, as a part of my comments, I tend to provide a bit of an overview of RHS, talk about our accomplishments, FY 2024 budget update, our priorities, and then looking forward. So as the administrator of the Rural Housing Service within the USDA and the Rural Development Mission Area, I have the privilege of overseeing the largest of 3 agencies with a $185 billion portfolio of assets and lending authority. We have a powerful set of tools to help meet the affordable housing and essential community facilities needs in the rural and tribal communities. We work through a network of 47 state offices and 400 area offices to deliver our programs and have the ability to be responsive to local needs. We are proud that our staff lives and works in the communities that they serve. So first, to speak to accomplishments. I'd like to mark the progress that we've made together and recommit ourselves to partnership and collaboration to meet the affordable housing needs of rural and tribal communities across the nation. Under the Biden-Harris administration, between the financial years of 21 and 23, RHS has made over $60 billion in obligations over the past 3 years. Of that, a majority of that, $46 billion, were for single-family housing, supporting 265,000 units through mortgages or home repair loans and grants. Another approximate $6 billion has been for multifamily housing. This includes rental assistance support to nearly 250,000 units and vouchers for nearly 7,000 units, and nearly $79 million to support 54 farm labor housing projects. So 10.2% of all obligations, or around $6 billion total, were to our persistent poverty counties. For single-family housing, in this year alone, our single-family 502 Direct had its biggest year since 2010. Our team was able to obligate $1.7 billion and provides 7,126 loans to individuals and families looking to access the American dream. I also want to thank those those of you that helped advocate to preserve the 1% interest rate in the FY24. Through the Section 502 Single Family Housing Direct Loan Program, USDA may buy down the interest rate to 1% in order for certain very low and low-income families to become homeowners. This program is core to our work to expand homeownership opportunities to low and very low-income households in rural America with an average income of $42,000. Roughly 55% of these borrowers were female-headed households, and 22% of the households identified as Black or African American. Just last week, I had the opportunity to deliver a national announcement at the Midwest Tribal Housing Summit. RHS issued over $9 million in funding to 9 native CDFIs so that they can finance critically needed housing on indigenous lands. This was a direct result of the administration listening and strengthening its partnership with tribal communities and nations. This action, amongst others, was announced last week as a part of the White House actions on expanding homeownership opportunities. Congratulations to our single-family housing team who worked on these and are here today. Now, as for multifamily, our multifamily team provided over $1.5 billion in rental assistance to support over 250,000 units in FY23. RHS provided $70 million in Section 515 funds to address health, safety, and accessibility needs to over 2,000 existing units. By the way, 92% of the households that receive RA, rental assistance, are considered very low income, with an average annual salary of under $13,000. So imagine that. Our 515 tenants at $13,000 average annual just speaks to how vulnerable our tenants are. 70% are female-headed households, and 64% of the households in our portfolio are considered elderly and disabled. We're working hard to preserve this portfolio through a $29 million for 39 multi-family preservation and revitalization, also known as MPR transactions, and increasing engagement and coordination with HFAs to leverage our LIHTC more effectively. Our team is continuing to work on process improvements. We hear you, and we understand that that's important. This is including standardization improvements to reduce closing times. Additionally, I'm pleased to share that we published yesterday in the Federal Register a rule change to update insurance coverage requirements to align with current industry standards. This change will assist with increased inflationary cost pressures and coverage requirements to assist with preservation of rural properties that could be lost due to disaster. We encourage you to provide feedback during the 60-day comment period that starts today. Additionally, we have been working on our consent to assign rental assistance contracts, which is anticipated to release in late fall or early winter. Our team has also reduced fees for our 538 program. This program is one where we work significantly with our HFAs, our housing finance agencies, along with our low-income housing tax credits, which we hope will encourage more participants in this program. This one will lead to more new supply. As for community facilities, in FY23, our community facilities program obligated $1.6 billion in direct loan grants and loan guarantees to support over 1,400 essential community facilities, providing healthcare, education, public safety, and other public services in rural America. This includes $854 million for healthcare facilities and $360 million for educational facilities. So a majority, I think almost 90% of our portfolio consists of healthcare and educational facilities. CF has experienced tremendous growth in grant programs due to our congressional directed spending programs, also known as earmarks, and has been working with grantees to obligate these projects. The American Rescue Plan included $500 million in emergency rural healthcare grants to help address the impacts of global COVID-19 pandemic. CF rapidly developed and rolled out this program, helping broaden access to testing, vaccines, rural healthcare services, and food assistance through food banks and food distribution facilities. So now for the FY 2024 budget update. President Biden's commitment to rural America is clearly reflected in his FY 24 budget requests, which includes increases to nearly all of our programs. The President's budget request calls for substantial funding increases in our Section 515 rental housing, our Section 502 homeownership loans, the Rural Community Development Initiative grant, and in loans and grants for both farm labor housing and home repairs. The budget proposed $1.65 billion for Section 521 rental assistance would enable USDA to renew all of its rental assistance contracts, including 27,000 contracts added by the American Rescue Plan, and provide rental assistance for some new Section 515 units. Also included was $200 million funding level for the Section 515, which is intended to provide enough for some new construction as well as preservation of existing properties. The budget also includes some key legislative proposals around the President's homeownership and affordable housing priorities. First, decoupling. The budget also calls for authorizing the decoupling of rental assistance from the Section 515 and Section 514 mortgages to help with managing maturing mortgages. Currently, USDA can only provide rental assistance to properties with a USDA mortgage. Once the USDA mortgage matures, the affordable units are lost. Decoupling would allow us to separate rental assistance from a maturing USDA mortgage and allow us to continue paying rental assistance on the units without a USDA loan. Congress responded to particular budget requests by asking us to conduct 5 stakeholder listening sessions and report back to Congress. The budget also calls for permanent authorization of the Multifamily Preservation and Revitalization Program, also known as MPR, as well as opportunities to increase climate resilience, green and energy efficient improvements for new construction improvements, among other proposals. So now to speak to priorities for 2024. Operation improvements. We will continue to focus on removing barriers from all of our programs and making improvements that reduce barriers for those looking to access our programs that need it most. For single-family housing, we are laser focused on the unified replacement. Our new system is expected in production in fiscal year 2025. This will make it easier for our customers and our staff to submit applications. Our single-family team also is working on a pilot to test alternative eligibility criteria to community representation for community land trust organizations through its Section 502 Direct Home Loan Program. For multifamily, our priorities is preservation, preservation, preservation. Our multifamily team is continuing to explore innovative approaches and redoubling our efforts to provide targeted assistance to maturing properties and those persistent in high poverty areas. Enhanced operations. We are working with our multifamily leadership team to meet current and future needs, including better alignment with LIHTC, developing standardized closing documents, and reducing closing timelines. And as for the SuperNOSA, our team is working diligently to clear out the pipeline of applications for funding, and we're working on putting out a new FY24 funding announcement soon, and stay tuned for information to come. For community facilities, we're working on a regulation update of the Community Facilities Direct Loan and Grant Program, which will help streamline and simplify our programs to better meet the essential community facility needs in rural communities. We want to focus also on enhancements to our RCDI, also known as the Rural Community Development Initiative grants, and our technical assistance training grants to increase equitable access to capacity building grants to help our recipients to better meet the needs of the communities We hear from you, and we want to hear from you. So looking forward, I think as we collaborate, these are important points that we realize as a part of our travel where we're seeing change. First of all, rural America, demographics are changing. I think we collectively have spent so much time at looking backwards. We've also took a lot of time in understanding the impact of COVID, but we have to look up and understand that those that we're serving, that demographic is quickly changing. We're seeing an explosion of Latinos in rural America. I, originally born in Wisconsin, we would have saw a loss in the last 20 years to the population in Wisconsin if it weren't for the 200% increase of Latinos within that community. And we're seeing that across the Midwest and across the Southwest. We're seeing a mass reverse migration of African Americans from the Midwest back to the South and the Southwest. And when they move, and they want to move to these larger cities, they're realizing affordability is just not there. And so we're seeing movement into exurban and rural communities. We're also seeing an increase of our elderly population as a percentage of the total of many towns. And so with this in mind, the question is, how are we preparing and strategizing forward and a part of our requests for resources to address these changes? Also, we know that there's a growing need for rural rental housing. Years of declining investment in renovation of existing and construction of new housing in our small towns, as well as tribal and farming communities, has resulted in a housing deficit. The growing number of rural colleges and hospitals facing financial distress. Recently, I spoke at the National Rural Health Association about the work that we do and how we work with rural hospitals. And it was very concerning around the fact that they presented information around the health of rural hospitals. And what we're seeing is within the South, the Southwest, where we see a significant amount of African American and Latino populations, is where we see some of the most vulnerable rural health medical systems. And then also impact of disasters. Natural disasters, including coastal flooding, drought, earthquakes, and hurricanes, pose a serious threat to rural communities across the country. Investments to build resilience before disasters occur are needed. And so, in closing, I want to thank you all for the support as we continue to look forward to opportunities to collaborate across federal government, with housing finance authorities, with CDFIs, and with other stakeholders in order to address the rural community needs. There's a lot to tackle in the coming year to make progress in preserving RHS multifamily portfolio and in meeting and expanding the affordable housing essential facility needs of rural communities. We look forward to collaborating with HAC and all of you. We need your innovative ideas and your voices to speak and stand up for rural America. I'm excited that you will be hearing next from our amazing RHS Deputy Administrators, Kathy Glover, Jamie Davenport, Carissa Stiers. They will be able to dig a little bit deeper into the specifics and help you answer any of your additional questions. I greatly appreciate their leadership and support over the past 2 years as the administrator of RHS. So thank you, Eileen and Marion, for this opportunity, and I pass it back to you.
So Joaquin and Marion very generously offered to put themselves out there and answer questions. Very high level. Remember, we talked about how much they have on their plates. So it's very retail. Hold it for the staff. But we'd love to hear anybody have any questions. I could ask one. This is a pretty simple one. Marion, price program sounds amazing. Who's eligible to apply for that?
It is an amazing program. So everybody's eligible to apply for the PRICE program. So states, cities, counties, tribes, nonprofits, CDFIs, entities in partnership with other eligible applicants. I don't have the entire statute memorized, but basically everybody can come in who's nonprofit, government, or working with them.
Great, thank you. There is a microphone in the middle. I can't believe Like, are we all that tired? Nobody has any questions for these guys? We can just eat more?
Some brave soul is making
Somebody's coming.
making their way. I will say that
Natalie!
Good morning. My name is Natalie Maxwell. I'm with the National Housing Law Project. I want to thank you both for being here. You've both gotten many emails from me about both rural housing issues and disaster housing issues. And so the question that I have this morning, I'll ask one question, assuming that other people have questions, otherwise I will come back to the mic. But my first question this morning is for Joaquin. If you could talk a little bit about what, in the event of a government shutdown, what that is going to mean for rural communities and what the agency's plan is, particularly around housing. Obviously, we have some concerns about the impact of the lack of rental assistance, particularly for low-income renters in those communities where our housing providers are just not clear about what that funding is going to look like. And so even if you can't speak specifically to the rental assistance piece, if you can provide more generally, and I can follow up with Carissa later today. Thanks.
Yeah, thank you for that question. I think rightfully so, we should all be concerned. And the first time when there was potential, a conversation about potential lapse in funding, also known as a shutdown, we went into planning mode, and I'm sure you all did too. It was impressive. I've never been through this myself, but it was comforting to know that my deputy administrators, our acting Undersecretary Roger Glendenning, if you had the opportunity to hear him speak yesterday, with many years of experience, it was just a pleasure to be surrounded by those. There is a term called do no harm, and when it comes to rental assistance, that is first and foremost, which was a part of our planning and making sure that do no harm occurs. And so the rental assistance is protected. As a part of our planning, we came up with a significant plan as to what will be protected, and then what can we not work on. And as a part of that, we have released a plan prior to, I think it was this last time, and we will release a plan that's going to be much more specific. But what I will say around this is that for the multifamily side is that we're working on ensuring that the maximum number of rental contracts can continue to uninterrupted in the event of a lapse in funding. And so during a prolonged shutdown, we are unable to renew expired contracts. We are hoping to head this off somewhat by renewing certain contracts before the end of the continuing resolution. We are also looking into whether we can have a team available to close loans already in the pipeline in the event of prolonged funding lapse. And then for single-family housing, we will make staff available to manage construction draws on a limited basis. We will periodically review outstanding conditional commitments and issue loan note guarantees to our lenders. And so what I will do is then defer to a little bit more of the specific plans when we have our breakout sessions thereafter.
Thank you.
And I know that was addressed to Joaquin, but I think people want to know the same question for HUD. And if you have any insight into the other sort of non-CPD programs that impact rural communities?
Sure. So the do no harm concept also applies at HUD. So vouchers continue to get paid, ongoing contracts, funds become available. But the corollary is basically do nothing new. So most of the work does stop. Most of the staff who can answer questions are not available. New NOFOs don't come out. Grant processing on NOFO applications that have come in stops. I will say I have been very negative about the government being able to stay open this fall, and I am now feeling my first burst of optimism after reading some of the things from new Speaker of the House and the way he's talking about ensuring that there's a budget. I was reading in the news yesterday that the Republicans in the House want to ensure he has a soft landing, understand that that means potentially doing another continuing resolution, keeping the government open past November 16th. I just know what I read in the news, but I hope you can share some of my optimism that that means at least into January, that we would get a stay or potentially later, because he said he wants to avoid a Christmas shutdown and being jammed at the holiday. Hopefully we stay open.
Thanks. Our next.
Yes, good morning. I want to address it to HUD. My name is Patricia Ross, and I'm from the area of state of Mississippi. And I want to ask you in regarding the permanent supportive housing, as well as you said some things about, I know another program about technical assistance. My biggest question is under that's permanent supportive housing. Do you have to be a part of, I know in Mississippi, you got, in the southern part, you've got the balance of care, and then, well, continuum of care, and then for the state of Mississippi, I think the northern part, you either have continuum of care. Do you have to kind of be partnered with them? We have we've been a part of HUD since, in housing, counseling since, 2009. So I'm just asking you questions, how does that applies?
Yeah, so the funding is provided for continuums of care. So it's going to be a new application that comes out. So if there's a new continuum of care formed, or someone who joins an existing continuum of care,
Okay.
Including as part of the balance of state, which it sounds like your community would be, then they would potentially be eligible.
Just hook up with them as well?
Yeah, so we'll have to wait for the NOFO to come out for everybody to understand by Congress attaching it to the continuum of care program.
Right, because the biggest things I've seen in there is it's like you had some things in there for kind of different things that you could be. And then the next question I want to ask is about technical assistance for various projects. How is that basically working? Who can apply for that? Could it be just non-for-profits, or do you have to basically, non-for-profit with CDCs, or who can apply for those programs?
So we have a lot of different vehicles for providing technical assistance. So Congress gives us a bunch of different programs. The biggest one is actually the Community Compass NOFO.
Yes.
That HUD administers, and then you can take a look as those annual NOFOs come out, and there are all kinds of different providers that come in to provide the technical assistance.
Okay.
On the community side,
Yes.
Generally someone who's receiving a sub-grant or a grant of assistance can ask for TA from HUD.
Okay.
But then we also have explicit grant programs, like the Section 4 program, like the Rural Capacity Building program, that provide assistance, and those primarily go for nonprofits.
Okay.
And we have a whole bunch of my colleagues here today. I know it's a little hard to see who all is here with the bright lights, but we have our Deputy Assistant Secretary, Robin Keegan, and our directors, Dr. Jackie Williams and Moriel Elchum, and probably some more of our team here, and so they're happy to talk more specifically if you want to catch them in the HUD breakout session.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Hi, Laura Buxbaum from Maine. Thank you for being here. My question is for Administrator Arturo. We have a farm bill that has expired and a new farm bill that's being worked on. Hopefully we'll have a new farm bill in the next couple of months. Housing does not play a large part typically within the farm bill, but some advocates have been trying to find ways to elevate the profile of your programs, and I wondered if you had priorities for the farm bill that you would be willing to share with us. Thank you.
Thank you for that question. First of all, can we just take a moment? My heart, my prayers, and my thoughts to those that are from Maine, to those that are in Maine. It's hard to swallow that. So
Thank you.
a collective hug, please, and sorry.
Thank you. We think of Maine as being one of these, safe places, but if you think about all of the mass shootings that we've seen in the last 5-10 years, they're all in places like that, right? They're places that, one would never expect it to happen. So, but thank you.
Yeah, we share your collective emotion, and thank you for being strong and being here for us. For the Farm Bill, like you had mentioned, I think what's really important is the fact that, from what I understand, is that housing's never really been addressed in the Farm Bill. But remember I talked about the headwinds that are changing? Like, you all have been vocal. And how do we know that? Is because we've been having a record amount of technical assistance requests from the Hill. The Hill is reaching out to us to saying, hey, what about this? Or what do you think about these ideas? Or if we were to do this, what does that look like and how does it impact you? It's coming through. Also, as I travel and or when we meet with stakeholders, not only are we talking about the work they're doing and kind of the request for an increase in resources, but there's a third topic or agenda item that they always bring up, and saying that we talk to the Hill and these are our priorities for the Farm Bill. And so, you know, we're not the ones that set, USDA, we don't set the priorities, but what we'll say is that modernization of rural housing service is very, very important, and we're hearing that that's being addressed from many diverse stakeholders. So I will tell you that it feels good to know that you all as advocates have been speaking to the Hill and saying, be considerate of these resources so we can do our work, but do not forget about the modernization efforts. And that was what I had mentioned earlier around IT and staffing. Like, you had been very clear and vocal about that. So thank you.
Just a quick follow-up. Is a MPR authorization perhaps a priority that you might support?
I will let you know when it comes to, aside from the Farm Bill, you had mentioned to me, you had heard me speak in the priorities here, that preservation. You heard me say it 3 times, and I think I mentioned the fact that MPR is a very important program to us. And so, Farm Bill or not, understand that it is an absolute priority for USDA.
Good morning, Joaquin. Gideon Anders, formerly with the Housing Law Project and also formerly with HAC on the board. I'm absolutely pleased that you've now 2 times, said preservation 3 times in a row. One of the critical areas in which preservation needs to be done, and particularly when the agency wants to enhance the number of 515 projects are transferred to nonprofit organizations, is the availability of Section 515 funds to make the purchase. We were told the other day that only a small percentage of the 515 funds that are available are going to be made available for preservation. Can you elaborate how much of the 515 funds that are available for this year are going to be available for preservation?
Respectfully, I'm going to ask if we can take that question. That is. I wouldn't have as good of an answer as we leave it for our multifamily for the next breakout session, but I would like to say this, is yesterday, or the day before yesterday, these days kind of mixed together here. The day before yesterday, I had the privilege of speaking to the Affordable Housing Tax Credit Coalition. And in that room, I said something that I felt empowered to say on behalf of all of us, is I said, you know what, I feel like at the end of my comments, you're gonna have a question about how does MPR, how does USDA products work better with the low-income housing tax credit programs? And I'm here to challenge you all as tax credit professionals to ask you, how does the low-income housing tax credit program and your program and other additional programs work better with us also? We're always being challenged at the fact for us to get out there and improve our systems, which needs to be done. But I think as we continue to challenge all of the other resources, how they work better with us, that's going to be very important. I will let you know that the transfer conversation, one of the first things that happened to me when I was working in the administration, I think I was in Minnesota as a matter of fact, was a frustration on the timeline and how long it took us to be able to transfer. That's a very serious problem. And so we've been working internally at changing our processes to be able to transfer quicker. We've come up with a simple transfer process that is still kind of in its piloting phase, but it's something that I know it's important and a priority of ours. Again, if for the actual percentages, I'd ask respectfully if we can go to the next breakout session.
Yeah, I'd like to see a better a bigger commitment to preservation in the 515. Let me just a quick comment on LHTC. The problem is with rural projects, I forget what the average is of the 515 program, but the size of the project is somewhere between 20 to 30 to 35 units per project. The cost of doing LHTC funding is too high to make those developments eligible for the LHTC program. And unless you consolidate projects over a large geographic area and bring it up to 50, 75, or 100 units at a time, it's impossible to do the LHTC program in the small rural communities.
So I would ask respectfully if we can change the word from impossible to very difficult. The only reason why is because that day we actually announced a project that was 32 units and it was being awarded in partnership with us and one of the local housing finance authorities in Wisconsin, as a matter of fact. It was farm worker housing. I'll be honest with you, when I led WIDA, which is the HFA, one of the projects that we did was really what you had said is a consolidation of projects so that communities can put them together in a project. But this is what I had mentioned around the fact is that it is very difficult to do smaller projects with LIHTC. However, that's where the challenge is to the LIHTC community also, because we know every state, they have a commitment to wanting to see new supply within rural. It's difficult, but not impossible.
Thank you.
Good morning. I'm Rose Garcia with Tierra del Sol Housing Corporation in New Mexico and West Texas. And I appreciate all the wonderful programs that you're administering, as well the existing programs that we all enjoy. My organization has been a nonprofit for 50 years, operating programs with rural development as well as the HUD programs. And I'm very glad to hear about the new initiatives that you're offering. What I wanted to ask you, and I'm really glad that both of you are there. My concern is the issues of customer service on the 502 loans. Yesterday, we had about 60 self-help housing producers from this room. And we had a special session on some of the matters with the program with self-help housing that we all operate. And one of the main issues was customer service of the loans, because there are many of us are experiencing extended loans to be processed. Takes months, 9 months to almost a year for a loan to be approved. This is in addition to the imminent cuts that are facing us on the 1% mortgages that you expressed, Joaquin. I also wanted to discuss with HUD. We received special initiatives from our senator for energy efficient programs. We can't get the contract responded. And so what can we do best to express to your contract administrators to turn around the transactions? We've been in it for 50 years, so we're not a newbie at it. So I just wanted to bring this to your attention, and hopefully others will speak up about it on customer service, and ask that you please give some special effort in that area. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Rose.
First of all, thank you for the work that you do with self-help housing. Prior to working at USDA, I didn't know much about the program. But if there are folks that don't know much, and I'm sure 98% of you, but that 2% that doesn't know, please learn about this program, because it gets direct at our issues and problems around affordability. And so thank you for the hard work that you do on that. Ms. Kathy Glover, well known amongst you all, a deep privilege for her as the Deputy Administrator for Single Family Housing. In the years I've spoken with her, I feel like there's a few things that are important to her legacy as the great leader she is in the leader of single family housing. I think number one was the modernization of IT for single family, and Kathy has been a fighter for that, and you heard me announce in this how we're actually beyond the case of asking for the resources, and we're in the process of trying to implement it. And so a lot of that stands on her shoulders, and Kathy, you are so well respected on this. The next issue is just this, what you had mentioned, is the fact that Kathy knows that the seasons of single family, they ebb and flow, right? With affordability, with the interest rates, and that impacts customer service. And I will let you know is that that's a top priority of hers, and that is something that she will be addressing in the next breakout session, because it's very important that she wants to make sure that she's able to address that. So respectfully, though, I will tell you that customer service experience is something that we've been challenged by President Biden, the Biden administration. Easier access to resources, those were told to us day one as we accepted these appointee positions. And I will tell you, there's not a day that we're not talking about how do we improve this. This is a massive ship that we have to move forward, rural housing service. Not only do we have to be considered in making sure that we obligate resources, but that's, thank you for listening to me and all the billions of dollars that we obligated. It's all for naught if it's not done in a way that the customer appreciates it and they want to continue doing business with us. So I do hear you, and I respect your comment and question.
Thank you very much.
From the HUD perspective, Tierra del Sol is a critically important partner to us, and it's heartbreaking to hear of your frustration. Our customer service is very important to us. I want to be honest about the fact that we've frankly been overwhelmed by the deluge of the community project funds that we received from Congress. So they took a good dozen years off of making funds. So in that time, we shut down the office that administered them. So we had to set it back up and bring staff on board. We were able to move some folks in who are experts in grant management from around different parts of the Office of Community Planning and Development, different parts of HUD, which is great. But we also had to bring on a significant number of new folks who had not gone through the process yet. And folks may not realize this, but most of the grants that HUD provides, when there's an environmental review required, that's done by the state or done by the city or county. But when nonprofits are receiving funds, which is the majority of the congressionally directed spending, HUD itself has to do the environmental review or try to find ways to get cities and counties to pick up the slack, but they're not required to do it. So we've been navigating a lot of different responsibilities and a lot of changes. And we're committed to figuring out how we can work better across the board, how we can do a different level of triaging of projects to make sure that we can keep them moving, because we absolutely want you to have access to your funding and to keep going, especially knowing that you're such a successful partner who's administered funds for decades now.
Thank you very much. And I guess my only suggestion, and I know it's sort of probably not acceptable, but I will suggest it anyway. And because we all are here on behalf of the clients, the constituents, those that need the program and qualify. But what I want to suggest for you to consider, because you obviously have the personnel matter with changing personnel, is to consider outsourcing much of the technical processing, because that doesn't happen overnight. You can't train somebody in a very short training opportunity and know that the complex transactions are going to happen. Is to hire people that are professionals in the business and just get it in and out. The objective is to get the transactions done to all the constituents in the community. But thank you very much for your consideration.
I am back. So I have a question that really it's directed to the both of you. I realize that it really involves public housing agencies, so it's a different office within HUD. But just going back to this issue of preservation, particularly around the Section 515, aging portfolio, was wondering if you all are having conversations about the role of PHAs and improving their capacity to be a partner in preserving Section 515 properties in rural communities.
So I'll defer to you on the question of the conversations that are going on with the Office of Public and Indian Housing, since, as you mentioned, that's not in our purview. But one thing I did want to not forget to mention is, HUD wasn't a big winner in the big climate funding that came through under the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law and the Inflation Reduction Act. Other agencies got big money. And we weren't content to sit back and say, okay, we got the Green and Resilient Retrofit Program and we're done. So we actually created a navigator that's available on the HUD website for housers to go in and look at the funding that's available from other government agencies for doing renovation needs related to energy efficiency, energy independence, et cetera. So as one component of upgrades to buildings, please consider taking a look at our navigator and thinking about what funds might be able to be available from places like DOT and Environmental Protection Agency.
I am not familiar with conversations happening with PHA, so I'd ask respectfully you can bring that to the next breakout session. But I will tell you is that because I am of the HFA, the Housing Finance Agency Authority background, every time I visit a state, I make it a priority to meet with them and then advocating for them to create set-aside funds for preservation of 515 within their state so that tax credits could be used. We actually see some states that have done that in advance of my talk, like Tennessee has actually have a set-aside, I believe. It's Tennessee or Maine, forgive me for not having the correct state, but Tennessee put a set-aside of tax credits. We have other states, I think it was Maine, that actually set aside a bucket of state funds. And so, if you could advocate as we advocate to our state HFAs and saying, hey, these 515, they're vulnerable. We want to make sure that we're able to preserve them. Let's have a consideration of whatever funds you have, and even including the tax credits to be helpful in the preservation challenge that we have.
Thank you.
Good morning, Jill Lorden from Neighborhood Partners. We are one of the self-help housing TNMA contractors. And one of the things that happened this year that we have some concerns around, there was some new guidance, not regulations, but guidance around using the 38-year term for the 502 direct loan. And we're worried that it might limit the number of very low-income families that are able to qualify. Now, I'm not sure if that's more of a this session question or the next breakout, but I wanted to know if you could address that.
I didn't bring my guidelines for for self-help housing, so 38 years I can't respond to that. But respectfully, if you can bring that to the next session, I would appreciate that.
Good morning. My name is Christina Cannon, and I'm the leader of a nonprofit working in Central Maine to revitalize our town. I've never been to a housing conference before. We're focused on the Main Street model. We're a Main Street program, nationally accredited. And we are specifically interested in redeveloping a bunch of our downtown buildings because we have second floors that would serve as great housing opportunities that would not only provide places for workforce housing, but also increase the vibrancy of our downtown by adding more people to it, particularly after hours when businesses close. So I know that there's CDBG funding available, but that seems largely directed to nonprofits and municipalities. Would there be any appetite, or are there resources for our small local developers and or just building property owners that are looking to redevelop their space, but realize that it's not really going to be viable for them to do, and because there's no ROI, and a lot of our local banks don't actually really want to tackle this type of project. And I know there's historic tax credits, but a lot of our local banks don't even want to deal with any of those. So, because these projects are smaller, like 2 to 3 family, 4 family projects.
Your question is so timely. The Domestic Policy Council out of the White House, under the leadership of President Biden, they brought that forward as a topic that was really important. They're calling it commercial to residential conversion. Thank you. I believe today was it released today, or today, I believe, there is an announcement released out of the White House. So I would probably just Google that because I don't have the information. We ourselves are going to be releasing it sometime today also. What ended up happening is the White House organized a bunch of agencies and asked them this question around the fact of what resources do you have around commercial to residential conversion. And it is a handbook, a fact book that has all of the different resources that are available for that. What's interesting, though, is that when they first organized this group, they did not have a rural-focused lens, but eventually they knew that that was important. The outcry from outside stakeholders are, we need to make sure. And so this book now also addresses the rural component to it. On our end, I will say that you will see some of the ways that we can be helpful. And it's not just rural housing service. At rural development, we have three arms, rural business and rural utilities. And so there are some offerings by them. We realized when we looked at our suite of products, we didn't have anything that really worked towards that. And to me, that's an opportunity and a challenge for us. I will tell you that our Section 538, it has, I believe it can or has been used. And the reason why I say that is because we're seeing a lot of schools in rural America that are being redeveloped into housing. That's a commercial to residential conversion. And so if there was a way that we can use 538 with low-income housing tax credits and that kind of a conversion, there's a possibility there. And so I would look for that as an announcement out. And then lastly, I would say is that you mentioned something that's really important. Banks really trying to understand how they play in that space. It may take some time, but our community development financial institutions, our CDFIs, I think they're very well poised to support some of that development. I'm not sure if you have one in that area or might do some research to see if they might be helpful to help you do some of that financing.
Just a couple quick thoughts from me. So CDBG is the winner in terms of HUD's funding for economic development and for conversion. Any of the housing funds can do conversion, but when you want to do a mixed-use acquisition, conversion, CDBG. But one of the things that is a little bit frustrating to me is that so many of our CDBG recipients are leaving money on the table. So every single one of them is eligible to come in and apply for low-interest loan financing. And it's really low interest because they pledge, hey, if we can't make a payment, we can use our annual CDBG to make the payment. And HUD can grab the missed payment. We don't call the whole thing due. We just take the missed payment from their CDBG line of credit. It's called the 108 Loan Guarantee. I think the boring name might be part of the problem, so really welcome any thoughts. We've been calling it the CDBG Maximizer or the CDBG Multiplier because they get their annual grant plus they can get 5 times that at any given time. And we have seen communities use that for conversions. So in fact, what was once the largest building in the United States in Cleveland was recently done with a 108 loan guarantee. I would also encourage you to think about having some of the units that you create actually be condos or home ownership units, and then you can maybe have some better conversations with banks about Community Reinvestment Act credit for the housing, which they tend to be thinking about.
Great, thank you.
Thank you, Joaquin and Marion.